As we continue our discussion from the last video on the topic of purpose and meaning, specifically what it means for a Latter-day Saint, allow me to tell you a story. In the walls of a cliff, human-shaped holes appear. Many people gather to see that they have a hole that they perfectly fit into, holes made just for them. The desire and curiosity are too great, they must enter. But as soon as they enter, they become stuck and cannot move. But further in, the hole soon distorts their figure until they are beyond recognizable to something grotesquely unhuman. The story is from Junjiito's short story, The Enigma of Amaragara Fault. Just like the characters in the story, we too will find many holes in which we see only we can fit into. Fates seemingly predestined for us. A path we feel we are meant to follow, for if we don't, who else will? Or perhaps it is a path that we simply feel compelled to follow by situations outside of our control. Junjiito's story warns us not to become trapped by any of these holes. A friend once told me how he felt it was his destiny to pursue music, but I told him that I only cared if he chose it for himself, regardless of any preconceived, predestined fate. We need to own our fates and have the freedom to explore other avenues, lest we become trapped, and soon discover that we may be forced to do things and be things just to keep to the path. Now out of a less depressing story and into the wonderful and wacky world of Rick and Morty as we further explore why you perhaps wouldn't want a predestined fate. Rick is a brilliant, often drunk, narcissistic scientist who takes every opportunity to take jabs at a god he says isn't there. Morty is his innocent and less brilliant 14-year-old grandson who just wants to eat pizza, play video games, and fawn over the most physically attractive girls in school. Together they go on many portal-hopping adventures throughout the multiverse with the rest of the Smith family. When I first encountered this show, it threw a wrench into my life. It caused me to ponder my purpose in life. You might say the show made me do this to a lesser extent.
My life has been a lie! God is dead, the government's lame, Thanksgiving is about killing Indians, Jesus wasn't born on Christmas, they moved the date, it was a pagan holiday.
Let's begin with the question of a predestined purpose being thrust upon you by a god who pre-programmed you to said purpose. The insignificant factor of a human compared to this almighty god would make whatever purpose that was thrust upon us to be menial. Such a human confronting his god on this factor might look something like this.
What is my purpose?
You pass butter.
Oh my god.
Yeah, welcome to the club, pal.
It is no secret that Rick fashions himself to be a god.
If God exists, it's f***ing me!
A supreme being in a universe populated by trillions of idiots, devoid of any creator god. Which is why he is open to have an intimate relationship with a planet or hive mind. Though Rick, it seems, will even call out to any god to save him, even as he floats through an empty abyss, only then to figure a way out himself and declare that because of his own genius, there is no god.
Yes, I did it! There is no God! In your face!
Now let us look at a few sample episodes to further develop this theme. In the episode Meeseeks and Destroys, one of Rick's brilliant inventions is a box with a single button on it, capable of summoning a Meeseeks. This peculiar creature is meant to help with any task that needs to be done and then vanish back into the void. Because they are pre-programmed to do any simple task, their lifespan is typically no longer than a few minutes. However, when Jerry, Morty's father, wants to use them to improve his golf swing, things go south quickly. Frustrated and confused by the instructions the Meeseek is giving him, the Meeseek also becomes frustrated and confused, and so summons more Meeseeks to help, until there are around 50 of them. Both Jerry and the Meeseeks have put themselves in a hole of frustration, which, in Meeseeks' time, seems like forever. Soon, the Meeseeks decide that killing their god, Jerry, would finally end their existence. But before that happens, Jerry finally improves his golf swing so the Meeseeks can vanish. For most modern-day religions, which don't teach the premortal life doctrine, humans are not so dissimilar from a Meeseeks. We exist in a tiny portion of time compared to our benevolent ruler, pre-programmed to do a simple menial task while on Earth, and then get to spend an eternity in heaven with God. However, if we are to retain our personalities and interests into the next world, then eternity would simply become a most miserable thing. If we fulfilled our pre-programmed task, we would feel a sense of satisfaction, and then not know what to do with ourselves. If we never fulfilled our task, the longer we prolong the task, the more we become frustrated by it. In this scenario, we might want to kill God like the Meeseeks. Better to live a life without purpose so that life isn't about the destination, but simply living. It would make eternity a whole lot easier to handle. In the episode The Ricks Must Be Crazy, the showrunners imagine what God must be like if he is real. In a way, they show us why a god might want to maintain his Meeseeks without them becoming like him. The episode follows Rick and Morty as they travel inside the hover car battery to discover why it stopped giving power. Inside, Morty finds that Rick had created an entire universe that developed intelligent life, introduced electricity to them, and then used their waste electricity to power his car battery. As Morty put it,
That just sounds like slavery with extra steps.
turns out the people Rick created became so intelligent that one of their own kind, Zeep, created his own microverse battery to remove any waste with the same concept as Rick's. Morty and Rick then travel inside Zeep's microverse only to discover that one of the people Zeep created was on the verge of creating his own microverse battery. This turns everything on its head as Zeep learns that his one true purpose in life was just to generate energy for Rick's car. This kickstarts a war between Zeep and Rick, in which they become trapped in the third level microverse with savages for months. The two are then forced to work together to escape that microverse, go into Zeep's created microverse, and then into Rick's created microverse. Rick smashes Zeep's created microverse, and they race to get back to Rick's regular-sized universe. Once Rick and Morty finally make their way back to their home universe, the battery powering the hover car starts up again. Turns out Zeep and his people, now psychologically scarred that their whole lives' existence is just to power Rick's car, are forced to keep generating energy forever lest Rick tosses them away. That is, until Zeep finds a way to escape the universe, which I think he could. I am not saying that whatever god that created our universe is like Rick, just powering his car, but he must have pre-programmed us with some purpose in mind. If this is the case, it is still an existentially terrifying thought to contemplate. Along the lines of science fiction author H.P. Lovecraft levels of cosmic horror, compared to the god that created the universe, the things we do in comparison, we might as well just be working to power his car. Whatever purpose our god did create us for, we would still be slaves with extra steps. Any kindness he shows is only a way to keep you in the system. For many people, God is so impossibly above us that you might as well give up attempting to understand him. But what if God decided to endow us with greater intelligence? So much so that we would understand him and all the things that he does. Even so, God would say, "Man has become as one of us." What would happen if the wall between creator and creation was torn down?
Tell either side there's no wall, you bought a war. Or a slaughter.
In the episode Lawnmower Dog, after Jerry becomes frustrated that the family dog Snuffles peeing on the carpet in the living room, he demands Rick give the animal higher intelligence. After much pushback and warnings, Rick finally concedes to giving the dog an intellect-boosting helmet so Jerry can properly communicate with him. The dog suddenly understands what his masters want of him. He can now be told to go to the toilet in the bathroom, be used as a footstool, and fetch slippers. However, with a higher intellect, Snuffles begins to introspect about his current situation. He learns about the history of his species, and how humans domesticated wolves and used deformed genes to create smaller and smaller breeds of dogs. Snuffles decides to build himself an exoskeleton and communication device to start a revolution and overthrow the humans, doing to them what they did to his species. However, after Rick does an inception on Snuffles' dream mind that he should never become like the humans, Snuffles decides to take his band of newly intelligent dogs and colonize another planet separate from humanity. In theory, if God wanted truly obedient humans who could obey his every command without the slightest miscommunication, he would need to make us as intelligent as he is. However, this would paradoxically only create humans who would at some point rebel against their master to become their own masters.
You two are hungry.
It's a big day. We're gonna kill God.
Come again?
Christian God is real. He's been asleep for thousands of years. We're gonna sneak up there and kill him. Mob style.
The episode Multiplicity is an especially fun one to analyze from the perspective of a Latter-day Saint. One of the most troubling concepts that many find hard to wrap their brains around is the concept of infinite regression. The concept that our God is a God which has a God plus infinity. Each god's image having been created in the image and likeness of the God that came before him. Many Protestants ask the question, who was the first God? That's the God I want to worship, the originator of all things. To which we might say, sorry to disappoint you, friend, but there is no first God, as the song If You Could Hide to Caleb hints. But on to the episode at hand. Multiplicity opens with Rick mentioning how he wants to go kill God, only to be killed by space squids who turn out to be decoys of the entire family in disguise. As it turns out, the original Rick created decoys of his family in case any of his several enemies came after them. The decoy family had the same idea and created decoys, then those decoys created decoys, and so on and so on and so on. Each creation patterned after the old one. Every Rick was created in the image and likeness of the Rick that came before them, until there were so many decoys of the decoys of the decoys of the decoys that many of them started killing each other just to prove who was the original and who were the decoys. There were so many decoys that further down the line you got, the more and more lazy and careless mistakes were made. At some point down the line, we had a whole variety of decoys, from wooden ones to Muppet ones to some truly degenerate ones. With this concept of Latter-day Saint infinite regression, it begs the question, is there a God out there in the multiverse who purposely made a mistake of some kind, whether maliciously or not, and then another followed by another and another? Why do humans have purposeless organs in their bodies, like the appendix? Is it because a long time ago God's making possible intentional defects? Perhaps some things were of a God attempting to improve upon those in whose image and likeness he created. How different or degenerate looking could we be from a God several thousand links or so down the line? This is analogous to evolutionary theory. Homo sapiens look very different compared to their Homo erectus ancestors. It is a strange thing to contemplate. But back to the episode. Some decoys decided to start a religious-like movement to establish some kind of peace between them. As one gets up to say,
"We are decoys, brought into the world by an unloving God and driven to destroy ourselves by the uncertainty he creates."
But then some murderous decoys crash the party and kill everyone except for a wooden puppet Jerry. The next scene of decoys shows a family who has simply accepted their fate, that no matter where they hide is where the other decoys would think to look. No matter how many decoys of decoys of decoys there are, no matter how degenerate looking they appear, deep down in the subconscious level, every decoy of Rick is just like the original. This is hinted at by one decoy Rick, who tells his daughter Beth,
Look, Beth, I might not be the real Rick, but even if I'm not, he made me, or the me that made me, which means somewhere inside of him is a version of Rick capable of hearing that. A version of Rick who's sorry. I'm sorry about the clone thing too. I love you.
With this episode, YouTube channel Wisecrack pointed out how this is about Jacques Lacan, who theorized that God is such an ingrained part of human history that he has permanently marked us. No matter how deep underground we bury him, invoking the Nietzschean idea that we killed God with science, we can never truly kill him. God will always be a part of our lives whether we like it or not, unconsciously or consciously. This would also be connected to Carl Jung's idea of the collective unconscious, where basic human instincts manifest themselves in a universal scale with common symbols and archetypes. We could also contemplate generational trauma or other aspects of ourselves which have always existed since our first ancestors experienced them. This, as Wisecrack posits, is why Rick can never truly kill God, because he would have to kill himself in return. Other episodes of Rick and Morty, implying that a pre-programmed fate is bad to follow, might include Edge of Morty, Rick Die Repeat, where Morty becomes a terrorist because he is following a death crystal that tells him how he can die in old age with his crush Jessica. The Vat of Acid episode, where Morty lives a life devoid of any real consequences, as he has a reset button. And Final Desmithsation, where Rick attempts to help Jerry avoid a terrible fate foretold by a fortune cookie. If there is an episode that I missed that you want me to cover, then tell me about it in the comments section below, while liking the video and subscribing to the channel. As the show is so rich in sci-fi and pop culture themes, I am worried that I may leave out something important. I have given a few examples of episodes of how Rick and Morty can give one an existential crisis, but now we should probably talk about our two main characters themselves and how their philosophies develop. Rick is what you might call an existential nihilist. That is to say that with all of his travels through the multiverse, he has come to the conclusion that truly nothing matters, as he says,
Nobody gets it. Nothing you think matters matters. This isn't special. This is happening infinite times across infinite realities.
Including this?
Yes!
As Morty continues to go on more and more adventures with Rick, we begin to see a noticeable maturity in him, as we also slowly uncover Rick's mysterious backstory. In Season 1, Episode 6, Morty is determined to finally woo Jessica via a Rick-created love potion. However, one thing leads to another, and Rick accidentally turns everyone into the world into Cronenberg body horror monsters. Rick and Morty abandon that reality and travel to a new one, in which Rick and Morty died in a fatal science experiment. Horrified that he has to bury himself, Morty soon comes to accept his literal new reality. 2 episodes later, he tells his new sister about the experience and what he learned. He tells her this to calm her down after the possibility of their parents getting a divorce comes up, and thinks she might be the reason as an unwanted pregnancy. Morty tells his new sister Summer,
"Nobody exists on purpose. Nobody belongs anywhere. Everybody's gonna die. Come watch TV."
With the premise of a dimension-hopping duo, one is never sure if one episode is the same Rick and Morty as another. From this, the show can at one point decide to radically change everything in one episode, only for everything to be back to normal the next, like a classic sitcom, which explains how Morty can experience 2 Thanksgivings and 2 Christmases while still remaining 14. This reinforces the idea that nothing matters. The main Rick we follow is a deeply depressed man who goes on a wacky adventure and drinks himself to a stupor to distract from his meaningless existence. Hence his catchphrase, which means,
"I am in great pain. Please help me."
He knows all too well the cosmic horror of the universe, not caring about humanity's existence. Such meaninglessness puts even good morality into question.
What about the reality where Hitler cured cancer, Morty? The answer is don't think about it.
Though, as the show goes on, Rick uses his catchphrase less and less often. Jerry, in contrast, the ultimate beta male who can't get a job, is too simple to realize his existence is meaningless. Too simple to realize when he is in a simulation. But because of this, he can live a content life. In one episode, scientifically advanced dinosaurs take over the Earth and remove any need for work. Frustrated by their now truly meaningless lives, the family turns to Jerry and how he can be content by not doing anything, to which he prints out his book titled Never Trying Never Fails. But then when he doesn't get credit for the book, even he becomes frustrated. Rick explains to Morty in one of the earlier episodes why he takes him on all of his adventures. Because of his high intelligence, Rick's enemies can pinpoint his location, so to prevent that, he needs Morty's not so high intelligence. As Rick put it,
See, when a Rick is with a Morty, the genius waves get canceled out by the, Morty waves.
Because Ricks everywhere need a Morty, a program was put in place by the Council of Ricks to make sure Morty's parents always get together. One Rick decides to take advantage of this and create a whole wall of Mortys. One Morty, which the show calls Evil Morty, decides to break the system, destroy the citadel of Ricks, and escape beyond the central finite curve to a universe without Rick. The horrifying truth about his existence as an easily replaceable sidekick hits our Morty, even as Rick had previously decided to replace him with 2 crows, and maybe had a previous sidekick named Kyle. In one episode, Morty's consciousness is shattered into billions of NPCs in a video game. To get them all back into Morty's body, Rick enters the video game as the playable character Roy and starts a pseudo-religion to convince all of Morty to return with him. However, many of Morty's consciousness refuses to go with Rick until he tells them that he loves them. Rick hesitates and it just creates a massive war.
Holy war! Holier war! Holiest war ever!
Eventually, Rick can only get 90% of Morty to come back to reality with him, and we are left wondering what will happen with the 10% remaining. Back with Rick, one episode presented us with a backstory that was suggested to be fake, while another showed us that some aspects of it were very real. After meeting an alternate version of himself who introduced him to interdimensional travel, Rick refused to leave his wife and daughter to go with him, so the alternate Rick killed his family in an explosion. Rick then soon invented his famous portal gun to traverse the multiverse, and goes on a Rick killing spree to find the alternate Rick, or what the show calls Rick Prime. However, after killing who knows how many Ricks, our Rick slowly became bored with his existence and only killed Ricks because of it. He had nothing left but to continue doing what he had always been doing. At one point, he may have made a peace treaty with many other Ricks and established the Citadel of Ricks. In doing so, he created the central finite curve, which collectively would make him the smartest person in the multiverse without competition. One day, he crash-landed into a reality where his daughter was still alive and took up residence there. But this reality was the original universe of Rick Prime that our Rick hopes would one day return to. And Rick would eventually have to abandon his quest for Rick Prime altogether after being forced out of that universe by the Cronenberg monsters that he created. Rick had given up his search for Rick Prime until he showed back up in Season 6, Episode 1. Having just missed him, Rick becomes obsessed with finding and killing him again. He becomes so consumed by this purpose that he replaces himself with a robot to deal with Morty and the rest of the family, while he locks himself away in his bunker to search for Rick Prime. Rick's never-ending crusade against Rick Prime drove him to neglect his family, cease enjoying life, and be unable to think about anything else. So, what are we to do when faced with the fact that our lives are truly meaningless, without any true structure or order? We can be like Jerry and peacefully live unaware of it, or we can be like Rick. While we run the risk of falling into nihilism and despair, French philosopher Albert Camus teaches us to simply love life and embrace all of its uncertainties and absurdities. As he tells us, "You will never be happy if you continue to search for what happiness consists of. You will never live if you are looking for the meaning of life." Or as Rick put it,
"When you know nothing matters, the universe is yours. And I've never met a universe that was into it. The universe is basically an animal. It grazes on the ordinary. Creates infinite idiots just to eat them."
Though as an existentialist Latter-day Saint, I would say that it wasn't God or the universe that created infinite idiots, but that infinite idiots created themselves.
You know, smart people get a chance to climb on top, take reality for a ride, but it'll never stop trying to throw you, and eventually it will. There's no other way off.
But in the spirit of Sisyphus, who was doomed to infinitely roll a boulder up a hill only for it to fall back down again, and have to repeat it, we should always be getting back on top of the universe whenever it throws us. Despite Rick's insistence that nothing really matters, on many occasions Rick proves time and time again that deep down he really does care about his family, even if they are all really easily replaceable. Like the time he gave himself over to the intergalactic government to save his family. In contrast, Rick Prime represents the man that main Rick pretends to be. A cold, nihilistic man who never cared about his own family. With zero remorse, he doesn't even hesitate to murder his son-in-law. Even though Rick Prime is our Morty's real blood-related grandfather, he chooses the Rick we follow as his grandfather instead. Rick and Morty choose their family. Going forward, with Rick Prime as the central antagonist, our main Rick will have to confront whether he wants to fully give in to nihilism and really stop caring about anything, or choose to get back on top of the universe and create a joyful life for himself and his chosen family. As Latter-day Saints, believing that we existed before birth and after death, we might come out of this simulation we call Earth, as Morty came out of his.
What the hell? Where am I?
55 years. Not bad, Morty. You kind of wasted your 30s, though, with that whole bird-watching phase.
Where's my wife?
Morty, you were just playing a game. It's called Roy. Snap out of it. Come on.
Thanks for watching, guys. Stay tuned for the next episode when I dive into everything everywhere all at once, as we continue to explore the theme of purpose in a meaningless existence. And remember to keep it righteous.
We're too late to accept Christ. Jesus is always knocking at the door. All we have to do is open it and let him into our hearts.
How?
I'm so glad you asked, Morty. Just close your eyes and go to him in prayer, like this. Heavenly Father.
Heavenly Father.
Thank you for sending your only begotten Son.
I beg your pardon?